Halloween night, 1975. A 24-year-old Italian-American holds an image of St. Francis of Assisi in his right hand. It's covered in crimson from his pricked finger. He utters a blood oath to the Mafia. As burns this saint, so will burn my soul. I enter alive and will have to get out dead. I swear to be loyal to the family, to keep its secrets, and to uphold its code. If I betray my family, may my soul burn like this saint. The picture of the saint is then lit aflame, and his oath is sealed. You know, there's an old saying, the only way to leave the Mafia is in a coffin. Of the 5 men who took the oath on that Halloween night, only 1 is alive today. Today's guest is that man. A man who says, I am alive by design, not by accident. Michael Franzese, welcome to the Jack Neel Podcast. I think a good place to start here is telling us kind of what that oath means, and can you kind of just explain what it means to be a made man?
You know, there's a lot of misconception, misinformation about the oath. A lot of people believe because it's Mafia, Cosa Nostra, that we take an oath to lie, steal, cheat, and kill. That's not the oath. Now, you know, as part of that life, things happen. But the oath of Omertà, which is what it is really an oath of silence. You're never supposed to admit that the life exists. You're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to, you know, ever obviously betray another member of that life by talking about him or the oath. And that's it. It's an oath of silence. It's also, you know, assumed in the oath that you're going to be loyal to the family and you're going to be a good soldier and you're going to abide by the rules. And that's what it's all about. What it meant to me, it was very exhilarating that night. I took that oath very seriously back then. I take it seriously today, even though I don't consider myself a member of the life anymore. You come into the life, you don't sign a contract. There's no retirement age. You can't say, hey, I'm done. You know, they say when you leave that life, you normally leave in a coffin or you join the government and enter a witness protection program. Obviously, I've done neither. But, you know, it was very exhilarating. I was part of something that I had worked hard to become a part of. I had even a more special bond with my dad, which meant a lot to me. So it was an important night for me.
So before we get into your time in the mob and your eventual run-ins with the law, what inspired a pre-med student with aspirations of becoming a doctor to kind of join this life?
100% my dad. I never aspired to be a member of the mob. You know, I grew up in it, obviously. My dad was a very prominent figure, the underboss of the family. But he didn't want that for me initially, and I didn't want that for myself. I knew all about the life, you know, as far as my observations, but I wanted to be a doctor. I was an athlete in school. I wanted to play sports. I totally went into that life to help my dad get out of prison. He got a 50-year prison sentence, which I thought was a death sentence at that point. He told me he was framed. He was innocent of the crime. I believed him. My dad didn't lie to me. And we both thought the only way to help him out was to become a member, get on the street, and do what was necessary to try to overturn his conviction. And that's totally why I got into the life.
So your dad, Sonny, he had a 50-year prison sentence, but he was framed. He ended up living to be over 100. How did that, like him getting framed, him going to prison, shape your perspective on justice?
Well, you got to understand, I grew up hating law enforcement. I hated the government because I always looked at them as the enemy. My dad was an extremely high-profile figure back in the 60s and the 70s. He was kind of like the John Gotti of his day.
Yeah.
Always a target of law enforcement, always in the media. So we grew up with police and law enforcement around us all the time, and I thought they were harassing my family. I got many run-ins with them as a kid. And so I didn't like them to begin with, you know. And then my dad telling me he was framed after he had gone to trial 3 times throughout the decade, throughout the 60s, in and out of prison. So we went through all of that. And now he gets indicted a 4th time, and he says, I'm framed. And the other 3 cases he had beat. He was acquitted on all of them. So I said, okay, this is number 4. They're at you again. And I hated law enforcement back then. Really hated them because I loved my dad, and I wanted to help him out. So that's the way I entered into that life, with having a total mistrust of law enforcement.
What was your childhood like? You said in the book your dad's favorite meal to cook was something like seafood spaghetti. Right? Yeah. But over the family dinners, he didn't really talk about his personal life and the affiliation with the Mafia much.
He never talked about it. He never would bring what was going on in the outside world into the house. what I knew about my dad was from observation, from other people telling me, from the media accounts, never from him. He never talked about it. He took his oath seriously, and he never mentioned the life in any way. It's only what we saw. So he was just dad in the house. I mean, he loved his kids. He was a good husband to my mother. He tried to get involved in family activities as much as he possibly could, but he was always, like I said, a target of law enforcement. But our childhood was very turbulent, because my dad was in and out of prison, because we had law enforcement around all the time. It was very difficult to navigate. And, I had brothers and sisters, and I can honestly say the only one that really survived was myself. My brothers and sisters took it very hard.
Yeah. What did you kind of think was going on when you were a kid? Like, was there a certain story that your dad said he did for a profession? Like, when did you start to put the pieces together of what was really going on?
Well, my dad owned businesses. He owned a dry cleaning shop. He owned an auto body shop, which I worked for part-time when I wasn't in school. He also had ties to the record business, the music industry, I should say. I used to go with him to a place called Buddha Records, Casablanca Records. They were big labels back then, independent labels. So I'd go to the city and, go with him when he went into the offices. So, I knew that's what he did. But I knew there was another side to it. I just didn't know exactly what that was.
So you later discovered that you weren't the biological son, but the result of your mother's former relationship. We were talking before this podcast started that maybe that might not be the case. But how did this revelation impact your relationship with your dad at the time?
Well, I was told early on that I was the adopted son of Sonny Franzese, and it really impacted me because my dad was married before, and he had 3 children with his first marriage, and he met my mother when she was 15. She was a hat check girl at the Stork Club, a big club in Manhattan my dad used to frequent. And so, I was told from the earliest age that that I was adopted by him. And I'll tell you why this had an impact on me. Because of that, I always tried to do the best I can to be my father's best son. Why? Because he brought his other 3 children into our house because his wife left him and left the kids, abandoned them. So the 3 kids came to live with us. And my mother was young, and she didn't treat them that great. She was, I think, having 3 kids brought to her when she was 17, 18 years old was kind of tougher than her. So she didn't react well, and there was a lot of dissension in the house between my mom and dad as a result of those 3 kids. So I always thought he was going to take it out on me. I'm not his real son, so I always strived to be the best guy that I possibly could be. He wanted me to play sports, I played sports. He wanted me to have A's in school, I had A's in school. Yeah. I'll give you, my dad was a vitamin freak. He took 30 vitamins a day. He believed in vitamins. He used to chase us around the house with cod liver oil to take vitamins. Well, everybody would run away except me. I'd stand there and take the cod liver oil. So just things like this to make him happy. And so that kind of shaped, I think, my personality and always trying to be the best at whatever it is I could do. Mainly, in the beginning, was to please him. And that stuck, with me. So he had a large part in that. But cut to, I write a book, my autobiography. And I wrote it with a co-author, and he goes and speaks to my mom, and she tells him that was all a lie. Sonny was his son. Sonny was his father. But I was married at 15. I got pregnant at 15 from Sonny. He was still married. My father's life did not allow him to get a divorce at that point. It was forbidden in our former life. And so my mother allegedly married another guy because my grandparents were very upset that you didn't have a child out of wedlock back then, especially you live in Brooklyn with all the Italians. You just didn't do that. So they made her marry this other guy who, I don't know, I never met him. Really? And then so she revealed later on, she said, Sonny is his father. We just never brought it out. And I went to her afterwards. I said, after all of these years, you're going to tell me that? She said, well, what's the difference? He's your father. You love him. I said, Ma, there's a big difference, but it's okay.
Did that make you feel relieved, knowing that he was your true father?
One thing I noticed, anytime anybody would ever say when I was growing up that Sonny was, my stepfather, he would get mad. He would get angry. Yeah, and I noticed that, and I just thought, that was showing his love for me, but there was more to it. So, honestly, I found out I was already, in my late 40s. So, did it really affect me? No. People said, why don't you get a DNA test? I said, why? What's the difference?
Yeah.
He's my dad. Whether it's real or not real, it's the only father I know, so it doesn't matter.
Can you tell us about your initial involvement with the Colombo family and what that kind of role entailed to live again?
Well, when you start out in a life, you come in as a soldier after you're made, you take the oath, and my motivation was twofold. Number one, get my dad out of prison, which I did after 10 years. I got him out on parole. He kept going back. He ended up doing 40 years on that sentence. And then I wanted to make money. My dad said, in this life, you make money, it translates to power, not unlike the real world. So I was fortunate, Jack. I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business.
How does entering the Mafia give you the ability to get your father out of the situation?
What it gave me is the ability to, number one, track down the witnesses, get closer to the lawyers, learn the street, so to speak, because all the witnesses that testified against him were all street guys. And we had to find them and get them to recant their testimony. That was the only way he was going to get out of jail, which we did. And I needed money. Wasn't going to get that while I was a student in school. I had to get out on the street and earn because, there's a big myth that, when a guy goes away, the family takes care of him. He has nothing to worry about financially. That's not true. My dad had some money on the street, but after about 2.5, 3 years, it ran out. And that was it. Nobody gave us anything. So I had to help support my mother and my brothers and sisters. So it was important for me to, get on my own and help.
So things really took off for your career when you met Lawrence Irresponsible. Can you tell me the story of how you guys met and really go deep into the operation you built? Because it's really fascinating.
I become a made guy in 1975, and for the next 3 or 4 years, I was doing pretty good. I had a couple of automobile dealerships legitimately. I had money on the street. I had auto body shops. I had a lot of stuff going on. And so my name was getting out there. I had a fairly big crew. And I was kind of the guy on Long Island, because of my father's name. Then it was me out there. And Irresponsible comes to see me one day, and he says, listen, I have a small gasoline operation out in Suffolk County, which is further east. And he said, I need some help. There's some guys in another family that's shaking me down. They're extorting me for money. Could you help me out? And I looked into it a little bit, and I decided not to. I said, no, it's okay. He was a big guy, 6'4", 450 pounds. Yeah. Just something about him that, so I said, I can't help you. But he was very persistent, and he kept coming back. And finally he says, please let me talk to you just for a few minutes. So I sit down with him. He says, I have a way, with your help, to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. He said, I have a couple of gas stations. With your help, I think we can do this. Now, I didn't like the government. Hated them, right? So I kind of listened. And I said, okay. I said, I'm going to help you out. And so I made the two guys that would bother him go away, and I go into business with him. And I had a guy around me by the name of Vinny. He was my butcher, actually. He was a big guy, big scar across the top of his head. And I said, Vinny, I want you to stay with Larry and watch him for the next 2 weeks. See if he really has something here. So about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks after that, Vinny comes to my house on a Saturday morning. I was living in Long Island, and he used to bring us meat for the week, right? So this week, he comes to the house, and he's got a box on his shoulder, and I said, what are we having, a party I don't know about? What are you doing all this meat? He said, hey, Chief, it ain't meat. He's come in the kitchen. I go in the kitchen, puts the box down, he opens it up, and he said, this is the first week or week and a half's take in the gas business. He opens it up, smells like gasoline. It was $320,000. He got my attention. And that's how we kind of started the business.
So the scheme was essentially you would open up like a gas station, and then you wouldn't have to pay any taxes on it because you would close it down before the end of the year, because that's when the government would kind of do those filings. How much was gas at the time? How much would this kind of scheme save you, like, on the margins? Because no one could compete with your prices.
But here's the deal. It was in two phases. Initially, during that time, the government was collecting taxes at the gas station level. In other words, the gas station owner had to pay the tax. what was the tax? Depending upon where you were located, the federal tax was 9 cents a gallon, and the state and local was about 30 cents a gallon total. So you had almost 40 cents a gallon. In some cases, a little, maybe 41 cents. So that's how much you had in tax money to play with, which is a lot of money, because gas was cheap. Today it's more than that, but gas was cheaper. It was like $1 a gallon or something less. So what would happen at the gas station, I acquired as many gas stations as I possibly could. I either owned them or leased them. We had over 300 at one point. And for about a year and a half, that lasted, where we would report to the government. We had a way to keep them off balance, where they wouldn't come down to the station and raid it for about 10 months.
And that was federal and local?
It was usually the feds.
Okay.
Usually the feds. They're faster than the state. At least they were back then.
Yeah.
And what would happen at that point, we would kind of know. We would close that station down, let it stay idle for 2 or 3 months, and just put a new operator in there and start all over again.
And they wouldn't catch on if it was the exact same station?
They had no exact same station, but a brand new lease. If they went to the owner, if it wasn't us, they went to the owner. Hey, we don't know. The guy disappeared. I have no idea who he is or where. We're not in the gas business. We're in the real estate business. We lease out places. That was it.
So if there were 4 gas stations around, let's say everyone's prices were 79, 80 cents, like how much lower would you make it?
Here's what we would do. Let's say there was 4 gas stations on a corner and I had one. I acquired one, right? I'd get the other 3 and I'd say, here's the deal. Whatever you sell your gas for, I'm going to be 2 cents a gallon cheaper, sometimes 3 cents. If you go down 5 cents, I'll go down 10. If you go down 10, I'll go down 20. If you go down 20, we can do this all day long until you're out of business. And they understood. So I said, I'm always going to be the cheapest on the corner. That's it. And pretty soon they were buying gas from me anyway.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter. So that's what happened at the gas station level. When the government finally caught on to that, they said, we're going to change the law. You're going to have to become a licensed wholesaler. The licensed wholesaler will collect the tax, no more the gas station owner, and you're going to be required to pay it to us on a quarterly basis. Well, they would announce that. By the time they were ready to implement it, we already had the scheme down. Yeah. We were preparing for it. I had 18 licenses that were all licensed to collect the tax, and they were one big daisy chain. We'd run a license. Now, it was a complicated scheme on how to report to the government, to keep them off the back, to make them understand we were doing the right thing in the reporting. It was a whole scheme, and I had a team of people that implemented that. But again, 10 months to a year before they would come to the office. Now it was only an office. We didn't need a station. They would come to the office, look for the owners. We'd close that office down and move on to the next license in the next location.
At the peak of this scheme, Michael, what was the most amount of money you were bringing in a week?
We were selling 500 million gallons of gas a month at the height. We were bringing in $7, $8, $9, $10 million a week at that point.
This role kind of requires emotional acumen, whether it's managing employees, business relations, or personal ones. What's a psychology method you use to kind of persuade people to take your suggestions, be a part of your vision, just to kind of do the right things? Like, how do you persuade people?
Well, listen, number one, people want to earn money. Treat them well, and make them understand they're earning. I never shared everything that was going on with everybody.
Yeah.
That was more of a defensive posture on my point, because I always tried to insulate myself as best I could. But, Jack, I believe one thing. I don't like micromanagement. I'm not good at that. And I always believe this. There's certain talents and abilities that we have, and I knew what mine was. My talent was really finding good people. My talent was threefold. Number one, recognizing a good opportunity. Number two, finding the right people to do the job. And number three, motivating them to do the job right. I wasn't a nitpicker. I'm not a detailed guy. I'm not hands-on like that. But I had a talent in finding the right people and getting the most out of them. And I
What's
think
the key to finding the right people?
It's a lot of it is your own perception of somebody. Now, I've been wrong at times. Don't get me wrong. You don't never score 1,000%, but most of the time I'm right on it. And it's just sizing somebody up. Asking the right questions, just testing them out a little bit, and making them understand there's no ambiguity in what you want from them. This is what I want. This is the deal, and this is what I expect of you. And I'm always going to do my end. I expect you to do yours. And then watch them and make them happy.
I think this is a problem I faced in my previous businesses, and I think it's one you came into as well. How do you mitigate perhaps your business partner going from, I don't know, middle class to making a ridiculous amount of money, like millions of weeks or millions a week, because that can kind of change or reveal one's character? Like, how do you mitigate against that risk? How do you anticipate how people are going to become when they're wealthy?
Well, it is an issue and something you have to control. I'll give you an example. There was a guy that I liked his family a lot. I liked him. He worked in an auto body shop, and he was in trouble financially.
Yeah.
So I said to him, listen, I'm going to help you out. I said, I want you to go around to my gas stations and collect money. That's all he had to do.
Yeah.
Get there to him, hand him the money. And I said, I'm going to give you $3,000 in cash a week. This was back in late 70s.
Yeah.
$3,000 cash a week.
It's good money.
Well, after about 6 months, he came to me and asked me for a raise. And he was enjoying. He got back on his feet. He was making some money. It was a lot of money back then. And I looked at him and I said, do you think you're worth $3,000 a week to collect money? I said, I can get anybody to do that job. You don't need an education. And so I kind of put him in his place in that regard. But it happens, and you just have to put people in their place in a nice way without abusing them or harassing them, but make them understand. Don't get carried away with yourself because you could be replaced very easily. That's how I dealt with it.
There's someone like Lorizzo, for instance. He was your partner. Mm-hmm. Like, how did you mitigate that relationship of, I don't know, maybe not making him feel like you're the one in charge, but also making him not feel like he's the one in charge too much?
Well, he was in charge because he did the everyday, day-to-day business, Yeah. And it's a little bit different when you're on the street because you expect guys to be a little shady.
Yeah.
You just anticipate that. An example, I had these Russian partners that I was involved with, and when I made the deal with them, I told them, here's how we're going to whack this up. I said, it's going to be 75% my end, 25% your end. And it was 3 guys, and they looked at me and they said, well, that's unfair. I said, no, it's very fair. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're on the street, you're going to steal from me a little bit. I said, so this way I won't get that mad because I'm getting the lion's share. I said, don't let me catch you. But I already anticipate something like that could happen. So I'll never forget, Jack, the main guy, Michael, he goes and talks to the other 2, and he comes back, shakes my hand, he says, you got a deal.
Yeah.
They know. So, you let them know they're not getting over on you. And with Rizzo, I said, listen, same kind of thing. I said, you're bringing me a lot of money. I'm not looking under every nick and cranny of what you're doing. I said, but I expect you to do the right thing. So they know that you're aware.
Mm.
And sometimes on the street, it's a little different. They may take chances, but they won't take it so far where it's going to hurt you.
So this business eventually led to your appointment as capo regime to the Colombo family. What did this new role look like?
Well, then they put soldiers under me. Like I had my own crew of associates. They weren't made guys when I was a soldier. But then when you become a captain, capo regime, the boss assigns other made guys to you, other soldiers. And so now you're their immediate supervisor. The term is street boss. Capo regime is a street boss. And your soldiers can never go directly to the boss. If they have any kind of issue, they got to come to you.
Yeah.
And so now you're managing guys that, they're on the street. Sometimes they have trouble. If they have a business deal, you got to, negotiate it for them or help them out. They get in any kind of dispute with anybody. You have to resolve it for them. It's work.
How old were you when you got that position?
It was 1980, so I was 29.
Why were you never made the boss, under boss, or consigliere?
Well, I wasn't around long enough, really, for that. I mean, I walked away from the life well before that would have happened. But, my dad was very hopeful. My dad's plan was for me to one day be a boss. Because in the Colombo family, you had 2 factions. You had the Franzese faction, and you had the Persico faction. And Persico was always in trouble. The guy spent more time in jail than out. He was the boss. He was my boss. So I got along great with him. But my dad said, his dream was for me to be the boss because he was going to be on lifetime parole. But in essence, he would be in control along with me of the family. And that's what he would have tried to engineer. But quite honestly, Jay, I didn't want it.
Yeah.
No, it's I was making a lot of money. I had my own jet plane. I had a helicopter. I had a house in California, a house in Florida. I'm having a blast, and I'm a younger guy. If you're a boss, you got a lot of work. You know, and you got all of these guys underneath you that you got to worry about all the time. You know, they'll give you money. You're going to make some money, but I was already making money, so I didn't need that. You know, so, you know, had I stayed in the life, it's possible. I don't know if it absolutely would have happened, but most likely I'd have gone to jail. You can't stay in that life and last when you become as high profile as I was.
All this effort, all this energy, Michael, into making this money, building yourself up in the Mafia, building your name, was it still always in the back of your head, like your North Star was rescuing your father? Or did you kind of get distracted from that goal at times, or were you always thinking about that?
Never got distracted from it. But understand, my dad was out on parole 5 times. And every time he came out for a short period of time, he violated and went back in. So it got frustrating, you know, at times. And then, you know, once you're in that life, you're your own guy also. You got to worry about yourself and your crew and your position in that life. So I never was distracted from his, but it did get frustrating at times, you know. But I always visited my dad. It was, you know, it was work.
You've spoken about this in the past, but I guess with the election going on, I have to ask, was Donald Trump affiliated with the Mafia?
You know, Jack, Donald Trump, like any other builder, developer in New York, had to deal with the mob. He had to. We controlled all the unions, all the labor unions, all the contractor unions. We controlled them. So in some shape or form, whether it be Trump himself or somebody else, one of his guys, they had to work with us. That goes for Helmsley and Gutterman and all of the big ones. So Trump did too. But was he affiliated and associated? Did he answer to anybody in the mob? No, absolutely not. And I know they've tried to pin, like everything else they tried to pin on him, they tried to pin that on him. They haven't been able to, but he wasn't affiliated. Look, we had the same lawyer at one time, you know, Roy Cohn. And that's where I met Donald once. He may not even remember. I met him in a private club with Roy Cohn for a little bit, and we said hello. You know, I just knew he was a developer at that time. But he didn't have any affiliation, or he didn't answer to the mob or anything else. And I've said this 1,000 times.
Yeah. What do you think of the upcoming election? Joe Biden has just kind of stepped down and given it to Kamala Harris. What do you think the U.S. will look like if Kamala wins?
I think this country could be destroyed. I think we would be in trouble with, forget domestically for a moment, I cannot see Kamala Harris the same way I couldn't see Joe Biden, but even worse with Kamala Harris standing up to Xi in China, Putin in Russia, you know, the mullahs in Iran, all of which hate us and would love nothing more to see us destroyed, and I think will take advantage of us, and she's no match for them. So that's a real concern of mine. And then domestically, you know, look, we had a very bad 3.5 years. It's obvious. Yeah? This is not bias or prejudice or anything else. It's obvious. So can we stand another 4 years of this? I don't think so. I really don't.
Historically speaking, has the Mafia typically supported conservatives or liberals?
Well, not liberal. Democrats.
Yeah.
Yes. This is a different party.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up as a Democrat, and every mobster I knew was a Democrat. Every Italian family was Democrat. None of us were Republicans, but it was a different party. They were centrists. There wasn't a big difference. The reason we didn't like Republicans because they were the, quote, law and order party.
Yeah.
So we didn't like them for that. But there wasn't much of an ideological difference between the two parties. People were still sane. Now it's insanity on the other side, at least in my view.
It seems like the main thing they're pushing as the difference is the ideological differences.
Yes.
Who is the most dangerous mobster you ever met?
When you say the most dangerous, let me clarify. The most vicious mobster ever was Roy DeMeo. Roy DeMeo was a serial killer. The Mafia didn't make him a serial killer. That's just who he was. He just had a better platform being in the mob until he got killed. But
what was some of the evil he did that makes you characterize him as a serial killer?
He was just brutal. He was a homicidal maniac. You know, murder meant nothing to him. It was a first course of action for him. The method that he used, the Gemini method to murder people, I mean, chopping up bodies and all of that.
What's the Gemini method?
He had a club called the Gemini Lounge, and he would lure people in there, kill them, and chop up their bodies. And it was just, I don't want to offend your audience and your viewers. It was just, anybody can.
They're used to me talking about serial killers and crime, so this is very light stuff for them. But
I'm sure, anybody that's knowledgeable of that life will know who Roy Cohn is. So, was he the most dangerous? He wouldn't be dangerous for me because I wouldn't have any reason to fear him. The most dangerous mob for me was my boss, because he held the power of life and death over me, no question. And, but you got to understand this. We're all, in that life, we're all capable of pulling the trigger, or you wouldn't be part of the life. But if you're doing the right thing, you don't have to worry about that, so... that's the best way to explain it. But as far as a crazy guy, that was DeMeo. We had one in our family too, a Greg Scarpa.
Yeah.
Who I knew well. When I found out, I don't know if you know the story, but we found out that he was kind of like a government informant for like 20 years. And when I found that out, I got a little nervous myself, But he wasn't a guy that you want to go to dinner with. He just wasn't that likable a guy. Let's put it that way.
Do you think the Mafia attracts these kind of people because they feel as though they have power to get away with it?
Yeah, no question.
Who's the most impressive person you ever met? Could be Mafia affiliated, could not be.
Wow. Really was impressed with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Jordan, I liked him a lot. I have high regard for a lot of people that carry themselves well and speak intelligently. I can't name them all. Jordan comes to mind because I met him recently.
Yeah. And
very impressed with him. I want to be honest with you. I was very impressed with the Tate brothers. I just liked the way they carried themselves. I wouldn't say it was a surprise because I was communicating with Andrew for quite a while. And then meeting him, I really enjoyed meeting him. Thought he carried himself very well. He's a sensitive guy, believe it or not. He's got a lot of heart, a lot of feeling. I know he comes off a little bit differently sometimes, his public persona, but Tristan the same way, very intelligent. So I was impressed with them. They come to mind because I've met them recently and was impressed with them. But I've been fortunate to meet a lot of impressive people in my life.
Do you think in another life they would have potential to be like a boss in the Mafia or something along those lines, or do you think that's not?
Andrew? Yeah. Andrew's a street guy. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, what does it take to be a boss? Look, there are bosses that are not real leaders. They just happen to be in the right place and make the right moves to climb the ladder. I always look at it this way. A boss isn't necessarily a leader. To me, a leader is only a leader when people willingly want to follow that person. They have that persona, that, character, that charisma. And you could be a boss or a supervisor, the guy in control, not be a leader. I have many people that I had to answer to at times that they couldn't lead me anywhere, but I had to answer to them.
So having dealt with many trials yourself, which we'll get into in a bit, and then having seen your father's trial and knowing what framing looks like, what do you think of the Tate case?
There's no question that because of what they stand for, men being men, in a world, especially here in the United States, I shouldn't say especially, but here in the United States and in other places where men have been feminized, in a big way. And I think that people look at their position, their, wanting men to be men as being demeaning to women. But it's not. They don't mean to be demeaning in women, even though the way they sometimes bring it out certainly sounds that way. And I've told Andrew that. I said, Andrew, if you toned it down, everybody would, but this is how he is. But, and I think people here in the United States, put a bad word out on them in Romania. I really do believe that. Same in the United Kingdom because of their message. But really, they have no evidence against these guys at all. None. I spent 2 days with them. There's nothing there. You can't look at something somebody says on social media and use that as evidence of a crime. There's one thing, you can look at something that might be distasteful. That doesn't mean it's criminal. And I think, unfortunately today, a lot of people make that judgment by, he said this online. This is what he says on social media. It doesn't mean it's criminal activity. there's a line there.
He's a comedian, in a way.
Yeah. And unfortunately, though, you got to be careful today. You get on the wrong side of the wrong people, you got hell to pay. Look at Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody, I don't know of anybody, and this is, now, remember, I spent 20-some-odd years on the street, and I grew up in that life. Yeah. I don't know anybody that's been attacked by the government as badly as Trump. Legitimate guy, basically. Guy's not a criminal. He was a president. Yeah. But look what they did to this guy. If they can do that to a president and a former president, is anybody safe?
Yeah, and a billionaire.
Yeah, is anybody safe? And let me tell you this. Trump, before he decided to run for president, everybody wanted to be around the guy. Hollywood, government, everybody. He was like the king. As soon as he went against the grain, that was it. The real mafia is in Washington, not on the street anymore.
Did you ever see yourself going into politics in any way?
No. Yeah. First of all, whatever I did 30 years ago, they'll make it sound like it happened yesterday.
True.
And they'll add this much to it, so no. I think, listen, I am very concerned about the condition of our country. I have 7 kids, 7 grandkids. And I think my platform is to do exactly what I'm doing and try to make people aware, just to come to their senses. That's what it's all about.
In today's short-form social media world, we have very short attention spans. So something like a presidential assassination attempt is almost irrelevant 2 weeks later. But I do want to ask you, what do you think happened with the Donald Trump situation?
Let me tell you something. There's a lot of theories coming around. There might have been another shooter. Maybe it was a setup. Biden was doing it, whatever. I have seen the government's negligence. I've seen it happen in prison, where the government just makes mistakes and they're negligent. I have to say this, Jack, with all this DEI nonsense going on, putting people in place because of their race or because of their gender, it's wrong. We need to have the best people in the place to do the jobs properly. And, the woman, the Secret Service, she was a DEI hiree, no question about it, that his wife, Jill Biden, had a relationship with. You don't hire somebody in the most important job in the country to protect the president and the next president who has no experience in doing that. So, and this is happening a lot in this administration. And that's why we're seeing a problem with our military. We're seeing a problem in key places where we need to have the best people. So I think there was gross negligence. As I'm watching and I'm paying close attention and hearing what's going on, gross negligence. And I think the hatred of Trump added to that, because if Trump asked for more Secret Service, they don't want to give it to him. They're not thinking, this is my job and I got to protect this guy. Trump asked for it, we're not going to give it to him. They hate him. And they put his life at risk. Remember, that was a monumental failure.
Yeah.
They failed. He should have been dead. That kid was, if he was a better shot or whatever, Trump is dead, or at least, seriously injured, shot in the head.
So you don't think it was a direct conspiracy, but the negligence resulting from lack of supporting Donald Trump?
Yeah, I believe that. I absolutely believe that. I mean, I think the same thing, when you look back to January 6th, when he asked for National Guard to be present, and he asked for additional police officers, and he was denied. The mayor of Washington denied it, and Nancy Pelosi denied his request. Maybe there would have been no January 6th if that presence was there. I don't know. But I mean, this is the hatred of Donald Trump is to an extreme I've never witnessed before in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm a street guy. Never seen anything like it.
I want to transition a bit here. Michael, a common theme in your life is having full control. You once had a policy of never drinking, doing drugs, or falling in love. Then you met your wife. Can you kind of tell me the story where a particular dancer caught your eye?
I was, among many things I was doing, I had a production company, and I was filming a movie that Smokey Robinson brought me a script. It was a breakdance movie, and we filmed it, this was the early 80s, 1983. We filmed it in Florida, and we brought 20 dancers from L.A. to work in the film, and a lot of the talent was from L.A., and we had just finished pre-production. We were about to do principal photography on a Monday. So I threw a party for everybody in the back of the hotel where I had everybody staying. And this young girl, she was 19 years old, just came out of a pool, and I saw her. She caught my eye. And I was just very attracted to her. And I actively pursued her. She didn't want anything to do with me. She thought I was too old for her. I was 31 and she was 19. But I was pretty determined to get her, and I fell in love with her, and she was life-changing for me. She's now my
She
wife
rejected
for
you
39 years.
at first, right?
Yeah.
A lot?
Several times. I kept making a date with her. She wouldn't show up. She kept saying yes because she knew I was a producer. I think she didn't want to offend me. But then she didn't show up and made an excuse. Well, I had to rehearse. Well, I had to do this. Well, I had to do that, And I kind of said, okay, this is a tough case right here. I'm going to have to really work on this one. But eventually I got her.
Yeah. I met your wife, by the way. She was very sweet, and she kind of helped coordinate this whole thing. And reading your book, there's some really good love stories in there. But I do want to bring up a concern that maybe in this cancel culture people would have today. So there's the common, description of the Hollywood casting couch and movie directors sleeping with actresses. How do you respond to the notion that you pursued your wife in a way that might be like a power imbalance? Do you think that's just people being too political about things?
I mean, to me, it was genuine. I mean, I really was attracted to her, and obviously she's my wife of 39 years, so there's something there. But does it happen? And absolutely. I mean, a lot of these Hollywood studio heads, they think they're really about something, and that they have entitlement. I don't know how bad it is today, but yeah, with that.
A lot of men are afraid to pursue women after they say no one time, or just keep up with girls. But do you think that's how women are? Do you think the best women have to be kind of pursued?
Well, listen, I have 5 daughters, and I tell them straight out, you want to get some knucklehead guy, play hard to get. We always want what we can have. You make it too easy, it's like anything else in life,
So.
And I think, listen, we talk a lot I see a lot of this, and I don't get involved in any of these chatter on social media. It's not my thing, but, women talking about body counts now and this and that. I don't see where that's attractive for a guy, I wouldn't be attracted to a woman who had several body counts. That's what they call it now.
Yeah.
Body counts for us was
something else. Yeah.
But, it's a different culture today, different.
So a near-death experience led to you reconsidering your mob ties. Can you tell me about the time you were closest to death?
Well, actually, it was twice. One time I was shot at. I was getting out of a car. It was late at night, going into a diner. And somebody opened fire at me and the other 2 guys that got out of the car. And we hit the deck, and they shot up the car. They missed us by the grace of God. And when we investigated, it was a mistake. They thought I was somebody else. You don't make those kind of mistakes in that life, But, it was scary. But the other time, one of the horrors of that life, Jack, is you make a mistake. Your best friend walks you into a room. You don't walk out again. And obviously, through my 20 years, I know of times when that happened to people. And I got that call one night, and I had that experience where I was walking into a room. I didn't know if I was going to walk out. And I was scared, no question. It was a frightening night for me. People have said to me, did you have the opportunity to cut and run? Because I did, and I didn't. And they said, well, why? I said, it wasn't heroic. It was kind of just robotic. I was just so much a product of that life. I said, hey, if this is it, I guess this is it. And obviously I'm here, so it didn't happen that night.
Were you married at the time?
No. This was 2 years before I met my wife.
Do you think if you were married, you maybe would have reconsidered walking into
No,
that room?
if I was married and still part of the life, I would have still walked in. Yeah, because the life overtakes you, Jack. At least if you're serious about it and it really meant something to you, it's a whole different mindset, And so obviously I'm here, but what happened in that night that was devastating to me was there was a betrayal on my dad's part with me. He didn't overtly betray me, but he kind of threw me under the bus. And that was extremely hurtful. I never said anything to him about it. It wasn't until 2 years later that I met my wife. But I can tell you this, in all honesty, even though I walked into the room, it was an unjust exercise for me, and that's why I'm still here, because I showed them that this was wrong. And obviously they went along with that. But if that didn't happen and my dad didn't betray me that night, I don't think I would have walked away from the life.
He essentially implied, maybe it was him and your mother, that you were making money from the gasoline business or something along those lines, and you weren't giving it all to the mafia.
Correct. There was a big article that was written in the Long Island Press, I believe was the paper. It was a big article, and it said two things. Number one, I was getting powerful enough to break away from the Colombos and start my own family. There was zero truth to that. It was just fictional stories some writer made up to sell a paper. And then they said I had taken the government for over $2 billion, which also wasn't true. It was a lot of money. Honestly, in the end, it was probably over $1 billion. But, you know, this was a little bit earlier on, and, you know, they grilled me on that. And I said, first of all, take over the family. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We listen to something like that for. And as far as $2 billion, I got a little upset. I said, hey, I brought this deal in. I'm bringing you more money than you ever saw before. I bring my boss $2 million a week.
Yeah.
I said, nobody's at risk but me. This is all my crew, and I'm getting put on the spot for it. So I kind of, you know, I was getting mad. You don't get mad with the boss. You know the thing, you know. I never outshine the master. So I calmed down, and everything was fine. I walked out. But my dad, he betrayed me that night, and it was very hard.
You think it was out of jealousy?
I don't know why he did it, you know. I don't know. You know.
Do you think he believed the stories?
I don't think he believed it. I just don't know. You know, it's my dad. My dad never wanted to be viewed as doing anything wrong in that life. He was like the ultimate made guy. Yeah. Die with his boots on. He would never say one word to the government. You can give him 150 years. He got 50. Never opened up. Never. His legend in that life meant more to him than anything. It meant more to him. So maybe he didn't want to be complicit if they were thinking anything wrong about me. I mean, I don't know. You know?
He was erring on the side of the mafia.
Yeah. So he just said, hey, if my son is doing anything, I don't know anything about it. My son handles everything. I don't do anything. I'm on parole. It's all on him. Instead of saying, you know, no, my son would never do that, you know, because my dad still had a lot of juice. He was well respected. But he threw me under the bus. And that was very hard for me to accept, even though I did at the time. I never said anything to him, but that meant something to me. It meant more than being walked into the room, because I know that's part of the life. You get put on the spot. But that meant something to me. As a matter of fact, walking me into that room was actually a blessing, because it put me more on my guard of things, you know. Sometimes you can get a little complacent, oh, everything's okay. But it put me right back on my guard with everybody. But that hurt.
Did you guys ever reconcile that?
Yeah, well, listen to this. I never said a word to him. When I was writing the book, I said, should I put this in the book or not? Because it was one of the main reasons why I walked away from the life. I said, I have to put it in. Yeah. So he read it in the book. That's how he found out about it. And he called me. He was out on parole. He's like, I got to see it. I go and see him. What is this nonsense you put in there? I said, Dad, it's okay. I said, Jimmy told me that. Jimmy was the guy who drove me that night. He was in there. I said, Jimmy told me what happened, but it's okay. I never brought it up. I'm not mad. He said, but you put it in the book. He said, it's a lie. I said, Dad, I believe it. It's not a lie. I said, but it's okay. I love you. You love me. It's fine. Part of the life. So he never would cop to it or admit to it, but I knew it was true.
Why do you think he wouldn't admit to it?
No, he would never. My dad taught me something when I was very young, Jack. He said, and sometimes things turn around and bite you in the rear end, right? He said, never admit to anything. So I knew my dad. He was not going to admit to something that wasn't in his favor. Yeah. And that would not have been in his favor. So I said, Dad, it's okay.
Do you believe in that? To never admit to anything?
I believe it partially. Yeah. Partially, yeah. I mean, it depends on the circumstances, yeah. I think, listen, in our rule of our legal system, you're innocent until proven guilty, so you don't admit to anything. Yeah. And let them fight it out, you know. I think that's how you work that out. But, you know, it's very interesting. You know, Jordan, I can bring this up. Jordan has said something to me about lying. Yeah. And I said, my dad taught me at an early age. He said, don't ever lie to hurt anybody. But if you have to lie to help somebody, that's okay. And Jordan looked at me and he said, do you believe that? I said, absolutely. He said, I don't. He said, a lie is a lie is a lie. I said, but Jordan, come on. If your son was in trouble and you had to bail him out, you had to lie to bail him out, you wouldn't do that. He said, a lie is a lie is a lie. And he kind of explained why. And I kind of understood his part. But, I'm never going to lie to hurt anybody. But if I had to lie to help somebody, I believe I would.
And Jordan also says everybody lies.
He did say that, yes. Yeah. That was good to hear. So you're not the Lone Ranger in that regard. Yeah.
So eventually, Rizzo's ego kind of led to his downfall. What were the series of events that led to yours?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, the absolute catalyst for me walking away was my wife, meeting my wife. And the reason for that is I don't know any family of any made guy in that life that hasn't been totally devastated, including my own. Yeah. My mother died in 2012, 33 years without her husband. That's how much time my dad did up until her death. At the end of her life, her relationship with my dad, ugly. She blamed him for everything that went wrong. Rightfully so. What went wrong? My sister, 27 years old, my baby sister, dies of an overdose of drugs. She was a mess. My brother, 25 years a drug addict. I can't even begin to tell you, Jack, what we had to do just to keep him alive. If he wasn't my brother, my father's son, he'd have been dead. We had to work to keep him alive. So much trouble.
How did those two fall into drugs? Because the Mafia has a very strict drug policy.
Just got started early on. Experiment, one thing led to another. That's why, marijuana, they say it's not a gateway drug. It certainly is.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it has to be in every circumstance, but can it be? Absolutely, depending upon you and, how you deal with it. But, and then my other sister, 40 years old, died young. She died at 40 because she was never mentally stable. And my whole family was devastated. And every family of every member, same kind of fate, messed up. So I said, look, any lifestyle that does this to a family is a bad lifestyle. So I meet this young girl. I fall in love with her. I'm going to marry her. Why would I marry her, stay in that life, and she's going to meet the same fate? You got to understand, I'm arrested 18 times during my time. I had 7 indictments. I had 4 more indictments than my dad, or 3 more than my dad, okay, at a lot younger age. I went to trial 5 times. Fortunately, I beat every case, or I wouldn't be sitting here now. Giuliani was going to give me 100 years. I beat that case, so I wouldn't be here. So I said, they're never going to let me go. Never. If I stay in this life, one of 2 things are going to happen. I'm going to end up in jail for the rest of my life because under the RICO statute, they're giving guys 100 years. Jack, I'm one of the youngest guys out of everybody. I beat them all of these times. They're going to give me life, 200 years, without batting an eye. So I said, I'm going to marry this girl and end up leaving her like that? Why would I do that? So I had to make a choice. It's either her or the life, and I chose her. But the things that led up to that, okay, RICO, devastating. Guys going away forever, and the RICO statute was devastating.
Well, what is the RICO statute exactly?
Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act. It was a statute that was designed specifically to go after organized crime. Through the RICO statute, they were able to, number one, overcome the double jeopardy problem. So you could be indicted actually for a crime twice. And they were able to indict you for murder. Murder was never a federal crime. It was always a state crime. But under the RICO Act, murder is just another charge under the RICO Act. It's a predicate act, so they can indict you now for murder. So it was devastating. Plus, they had forfeiture clauses. I mean, when I finally pled guilty, I forfeited $15 million and $5 million in assets. So they have devastating forfeiture clause. It was devastating to that life. So I said, there's no way I'm going to last if I stay in here. I'm too high profile. Yeah. They had a 14-agency task force assigned to put me in jail forever. So, and then like I said, after that thing happened with my dad, I says, what do we really have here now? I said, I can't even trust this relationship anymore. So that's when I made the decision.
So you were given 10 years and fined $15 million?
Yeah, I pled guilty to racketeering. The underlying act was tax fraud. And I got a 10-year sentence. I had $14.7 million of restitution. I had a forfeiture of assets. I had a jet plane, a helicopter. I forfeited everything, a couple of properties that I had. And that was it.
What was your reaction to that sentence?
Well, I was happy in one way because when I made the plea, that was it. They couldn't come after me for anything else.
Really?
Yeah, there was no cooperation involved. The only thing that they could have come after me for was murder. But anything else prior to the date that I took the plea was over with. Now, they had nothing anyway, but just in case they were going to try to drum up something, they couldn't. That was the plea, except for murder. So I said, okay, this is over. My plan was I would take that plea, do a couple of years in prison, marry Camille, move out to the West Coast, hopefully make parole. When I'm out on parole, I can use that as an excuse not to meet with the guys in New York because it's a violation.
Yeah.
And I figured maybe after 10 or 12 years, everybody will forget about me. I'll live happily ever after with Camille out in California.
Has that been the case?
No.
No.
No. It became, when I walked away, Life magazine did me dirty, man. They wrote a huge article about me quitting the Mafia. And word got out on the street, and my boss got upset, and that was all. And everybody thought I was going to become this major cooperating witness because that's what happens. Guys, they don't leave, they cooperate, you know. But I wasn't looking to hurt anybody. I don't want that. I just wanted out of life. But I had a ton of trouble. Feds were all over me. Franzese, you're a dead man anyway. Words all over the street. Person go put a hit on you. Your father's went along with it, and they're pounding me in prison. And I said, leave me alone. I'll worry about it. I'll deal with it. So I get out on parole. I'm on parole for 13 months. It was a mess. People looking to hurt me. I didn't talk to my dad. The feds all over me. It was just it was a bad time. The worst time of my life.
You think the reason you're safe today is because you've kind of outlived everyone in a way, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, no question that everybody knows either dead or in prison for the rest of their life. Mostly dead.
Good.
Gone.
So your wife, Cammie, was impressively loyal and loved you fully. She saved napkins and matches every time you guys went out, and she said that she believed God had sent her for your salvation. During this time, how did being away from her and your daughters kind of impact your experience behind bars?
Well, look, it was very difficult. You know, in my case, too, I don't know if, you know, you're aware of this, but I did almost 3 years in solitary. Yeah. 29 months, 7 days to be exact. And that was very difficult, Jack. Solitary confinement is a form of torture. There's no question. I'm a dead set against it for young people. I saw a lot of guys in there not do well. And I'm not being demeaning to them at all. It's tough.
What's the setup of solitary?
6 by 10 cell, 24/7. That's it.
And you can't talk to anyone. You just get a little box for food.
It depends what kind of solitary, meaning that sometimes they have a solid steel door with a little flap, and then sometimes you have bars. Most of the time I had a solid steel door, but then for 11 months out of the 29, I had bars. So you could talk to other guys on the tier just because they're in the cell next to you. But, you know, what do you talk about? You know, nonsense. But, no, for the most part, you're it. You're solitary. That's it.
Why did they place you on solitary? Was it for your protection, or was it?
It was administrative detention, meaning that because it was word out on the street that I was going to get killed, they were protecting my life. It was an excuse. They were really trying to break me down. Because I would tell them, every day I would write the warden a letter. Warden, let me out of here. Yeah. I'm on the West Coast. There's no mob guys here. I can make it on the yard. Let me out. Just ignored it.
Did you get close to breaking while in solitary?
I had my nights, you know. Did I get close to breaking? No, I don't believe so. But I had some bad nights. I mean, I don't mind admitting that. You know, listen, I became a person of faith through that. I mean, I had my Bible. I had a Sony Walkman. I would listen to a lot of encouraging messages. I read, God knows how many hundreds of books I read during that time. The Sony Walkman was my life.
What were you listening to?
Do you know what a Sony Walkman is?
Yeah, it's like the old stuff.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I'd get the news. I was a Christian radio station I was listening to a lot as I was reading my Bible. It was very, very encouraging and resourceful for me. And then just listen to anything. You know, when you're in there, you read anything you get your hands on. You don't care what it is. And you listen to anything you can listen to. You know, and in music, I realized the value of music to just settle you down and put you in another place at times.
What were you listening to at that time?
Oh, man. You know, I mean, a lot of pop music, of course, but, you know, I think the best and the worst time in there was the Christmases I spent in there, because that's hard through the holidays. But the Christmas music was very soothing and and good for me.
You said Cammie made you so strong that you could be weak with her. What did you mean by that?
Well, sometimes, as men, we don't ever want to show any kind of weakness. And maybe, letting your hair down a little bit and just speaking what's on your heart and your mind sometimes can be considered weakness. But I think mostly in my letters to her, I kind of, let her know what emotion I was feeling and what I was thinking. And by the way, I got a surprise. Somebody sent me a message on social media and said, your love letters to your wife are on eBay. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So he sent me the link or whatever it is, and I go on there, and there's one of my love letters, or one of my letters from prison back in 1987 to my wife, saying, I got it down, but I'm saying, how the heck did that happen? Probably one of the COs or one of the cops that came to my house and grabbed some of my mail or something when they did a search warrant on me, and they must have tried to sell it on eBay. Believe that.
Really
but anyway, I was able to just, tell her what was on my mind and be a little emotional.
Do you think men should cry in front of their women?
Listen, the answer is no. But look, if you have an emotional issue with your child or, God forbid something with your parents, I don't think it's demeaning at all, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of emotion. Italian men cry all the time.
Yeah.
Honestly, so no, I don't think it's a sign of weakness, but sometimes we perceive it that way, especially if you're a street guy.
Mm. Do Mafia men cry with their brothers ever?
I've seen them at funerals, somebody that they loved. I've cried myself at a funeral, but to a point. I mean, you don't get hysterical and break down, but it's a natural emotion.
So when you were in the psychiatric ward, kind of correct my details on this story, but there was a guy you met who thought he was Ronald Reagan, and another who took male hormones and female hormones. Can you kind of share your experiences there?
When I got into Terminal Island, when you get into prison, you got to have a job, right? It's a crazy job. So the lieutenant came to me and said, they had a psychiatric ward. It's called B Dorm in Terminal Island. So they said, we're assigning you to the psychiatric ward. I said, for what? He said, to take care of the psychotic inmates up there. I said, you got to be kidding me. They said, no, you're going up there. So they put me in B Dorm, and these guys were crazy, let me tell you. They weren't pretending to be crazy. They were crazy. And there was a guy that thought he was President Reagan. There was a guy taking male and female hormones. There was another guy that was in there because he was threatening the president, and and they were on meds. It was the craziest thing, Jack, because they were all on meds. And whenever these he wasn't really a doctor. He says he was a doctor, but the psychiatrist came in. These guys would come out of their cells like he was the Pied Piper. And all around him trying to get meds out of him. And they had me up there for about 9 months until finally I said, hey, I'm going to be in one of the cells if you don't get me out of here. These guys are crazy. Yeah. Because I had to do, one guy had started a fire in his cell. We had to get him out. I mean, they were doing all they could, trying to kill themselves and fighting with one another. So every day was another experience up there. Finally, after about 9 months, I said, hey, am I getting extra good time? You're going to release me early? What's going to happen? No, none of it. Get me out of here. Or be in one of those cells. But it was a crazy experience.
So made men are considered kings of the prison world. How did your status affect life in prison?
Again, as you can see, my dad taught me well in a number of areas. He said to me, Mike, whenever you go to prison, he says, remember 3 words. Going to help you out tremendously in there. Please, thank you, and excuse me. And he explained to me, he said, everybody that's in prison that never got any respect on the street, they want all the respect in there. So they're going to try to show off for their, fellow inmates. He said, you bump into somebody, excuse me. So you want something from somebody, please, may I have, sign of respect. If you want to cut somebody in line, do you mind, sir? Thank you very much. Just use those 3 words. I never had an issue in prison. Never had an issue. That's how I carried myself.
Did the other inmates kind of know who you were?
Yeah, oh yeah. Because I had a lot of publicity, so they knew. And as a result of that, I'll tell you this. Before I went to prison, I never wrote anything down. I would never forget a face, never forget a phone number. Never. When I got out of prison, I couldn't remember a face or a number. There's so many guys coming up to you with plans and schemes and this and that. So you're nice, you listen, the ear goes intentionally one ear and out the other. So I came out not remembering anything, by design. But no, I was treated well in there because, first of all, they saw, the amount of money involved in my case, and everybody's proposing a deal, and, 100 guys wanted to be in the gas business. When they got out, don't worry about anything, Michael, I'll handle everything. You don't have to do anything. Just tell us what to do. Yeah, right. So I had a lot of that.
Spoiler, I'm not sure when this podcast will be posted, but I'm going to interview Tristan and Andrew Tate in 2 weeks. Michael's interviewed them in the past, but you were supposed to do another interview with them that kind of got canceled, right?
No, it wasn't that at all. I had spent the weekend with them.
Okay.
And they were very accommodating. We had a great weekend. We did interviews. And from there, the very next day, I was going to the United Kingdom to do a 10-city tour, speaking tour. And so we posted a photo of me, Andrew and Tristan, my daughter, and my wife. We posted it on social media. Well, I get to the United Kingdom, and a woman from Parliament, was outraged and called me a misogynist and said that all these terrible things about me, and that, I was so close with the Tates and they're misogynists. And as a result, she went and threatened every venue that we were holding our event at. Now, mind you, this is something that had been set up 6 months in advance. Yeah. Ticketed event. People bought tickets to all these venues. She threatened the venue owners, if you hold this event, we're going to cancel your business license. So 9 out of the 10 venues canceled. Wow. They were afraid. Now, she made these statements in front of Parliament, called me a misogynist, that I should be banned from the country, just from being friends with them or showing a picture. There was nothing more posted. We hadn't posted the interview yet, right?
So, he's very lucky his case isn't taking place in the UK, because they have the worst impression of him of any country.
Well, yes, and actually they tried to extradite the Tates there on a tax issue or something. They couldn't do it, but they tried. But so my promoter came to me and said, what do you want to do? I said, well, all these people bought tickets. Can't just go home. So my promoters had to find 9 new venues within 24 hours of each show. And they did it. As a result, we had standing room only crowds because there was so much media about it. And the woman in Parliament got a lot of backlash. She was getting hate mail, from people. But that's the extent that they went to because of one photograph that was with me and the Tates.
Yeah.
And, and Andrew and Tristan felt terrible. And I said, don't feel terrible. These people are insane.
Yeah. It just shows they're trying to restrict free speech.
Exactly.
Because someone who associates with the Tate, they're cutting off his communication with his audience.
Exactly. And I kind of, I want to say challenge, but I invited the woman in Parliament. I said, look, why don't you and I meet and let's have a discussion? I said, I have a very independent wife and 5 very independent daughters.
Yeah.
The last thing I am is a misogynist. To accuse me of something like that is ridiculous. And obviously she wouldn't comply or, she wouldn't meet. But yeah, it just shows you to what extent these people will go when you disagree with their agenda or their ideology.
Yeah.
The ones that talk about defending democracy are the worst, obstacles to democracy.
Michael, I want to transition a little bit. I have something for you. I know you've had associations with the NBA, NFL,
yes.
And we'll get more on that in a bit. But this is a Mark Jackson basketball card from the 90s. Are you a Nets or a Knicks fan?
I'm a Knicks fan.
You're a Knicks fan?
Yeah.
If you look closely at the back row, I've done a lot of crime stories and found interesting photos over the years. Do you notice anyone in the front row that looks a little familiar?
Is that me?
No, it's not you.
This person there looks...
It's Erik and Lyle Menendez.
Oh, yes, it is. It is Erik and Lyle.
Yeah, they got captured in this photo.
It's funny because people have said that Lyle looked like me, when I did all that time with him. Yeah, that is both of them. Wow.
Yeah. I just thought that was a really interesting piece of history. But I kind of wanted to ask you, so you were in at the same time as Erik and Lyle. Did you communicate with them?
I spent 11 months with them as solitary. They were on the tier with me in the LA County Jail, where we had bars on the, so we were able to communicate. Yeah, I was with them for 11 months. And well, actually, I was with Lyle for 11 months. Erik, there was some nonsense. They said that they tried to escape, so they split the brothers up. Lyle stayed on the tier, and then Erik, after a couple of months, they moved him out.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story with them. We got friendly, but we were when we had to go for a visit.
Yeah.
They shackled us, obviously, because that's solitary, and they had to walk us through the prison hospital, and the jail hospital. It wasn't a prison, the jail hospital, and through some of where the general population was. Well, whenever I would walk to the visiting room, and Lyle and Erik got a lot of visits, as they were walking through, they had to be guarded because people were going to kill you, you parent killers. They were like really off on them, right?
For context, everyone, Erik and Lyle Menendez, they were accused of murdering their parents in cold blood when they were young. But there's a lot of controversies around this case.
Yes, and I think there's a new documentary coming out about them.
Really?
Yeah. So, they had to be protected when we walked to the visiting room. So now Erik gets moved out, and now it's me and Lyle walking together. And when I was walking next to him, they don't know in there. I'm a white guy. I looked, I was young at that time. Now they thought I was one of the Menendez brothers. So now they're cussing at me and we're going to kill you and all of this.
I thought you were the third brother.
So I'll never forget, I got back to the cell and I told the CO, I said, hey, listen, I have enough trouble being Michael Franzese. I don't want to be a Menendez. Don't walk me with him anymore. And I said, Lyle, don't get insulted. I said, but I ain't walking next to you anymore because, you're shackled and what are you going to do if they attack you? And they do that in there. People are crazy.
It's funny that you said you looked like them a bit as well.
Yeah. That's why for a second there,
But knowing them for so long and being a very good judge of character, do you have any opinions on the case?
Well, listen, I mean, they were guilty. They admitted to the murder, but their defense was that the father was abusing them, sexually and emotionally and every other way. I mean, look, we got along on there, just conversation and everything. But
did they seem like these spoiled kids some painted out to be? Yeah. Or did they seem like people who were victims? Or maybe both?
I mean, you can tell Lyle was definitely the leader. Erik was more the troubled one, the younger, troubled one. So I think there might have been some abuse there. I don't know if it was to the extent and degree that they said it was. But, they had Leslie Abrams was the lawyer. She was a good attorney. That was a tough case to beat.
Yeah. Did they seem kind of like upset that they were in prison? Like, did they seem like they were being treated unfairly for this whole thing? Did they seem kind of at peace with it?
I think Lyle handled it pretty good, Erik, like I said, was more the emotional one. Yeah, he was troubled, you could tell. And then they moved Erik out of the tier after a while. But no, I think he handled it okay. I think he was convinced that he was innocent.
Yeah.
Even if it was, sometimes you tell yourself something and then you believe it.
Yeah, do you see that a lot? I've seen a lot of people who maybe have been guilty of committing crimes or doing things not deemed righteous necessarily, but they kind of convince themselves of the story in their head that they're not a bad person.
Absolutely. I saw that many times in prison. And you could tell a guy is telling you a story about what happened, and at the end of the day, they're always right. It wasn't their fault, or they were justified in some way. And I think if you tell yourself that enough, depending upon who you are, you tend to believe that. I think in Lyle's case, he believed that he was abused and that maybe he had the right. And don't forget, when that's his defense, that's what he's hearing from his lawyer all the time.
Yeah.
So now every day that's being reinforced. He was abused. And before you know it, that's what you believe.
So when you hit rock bottom, you recall feeling sorry for yourself, but you said it was for the first and last time. You then opened a Bible to Proverbs 16:7. When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, even his enemies are at peace with him. What did that verse mean to you?
That was the first verse that ever in my life struck me as having real meaning, because it was my first night in solitary. It was a night that the feds told me they were done with me, that I would never see the street again. They were going to indict me on new racketeering cases, probably murder. My wife would never see me a free man again. We had, little babies at that point. And I just felt my life is over. I'm done. And understand this, Jack, I was always a guy very confident in myself. I wouldn't call it narcissism. I'm because I see narcissism and I see arrogance in people, and I don't like it. It's ugly. I love to see confidence. I hate to see arrogance. I don't care who you are. But I had a certain amount of confidence in my life because I normally was able to handle things. But that night I said, I'm done. There's nothing I can do to help myself. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm going to lose the girl I did all of this for. I'm never going to see the street again. I'm done. And it was a bad night. It was a bad night. And, when there was a CO that pushed the Bible through the slot on the door, and I picked it up and threw it against the wall. I didn't read the Bible. But then I picked it up, and I started reading it, and opened up to the book of Proverbs, and I started to get a little uplifted. I don't know if you ever read the book, but it's a brilliant book. Solomon was brilliant. And some of the things that were Proverbs that I read were really sensible. And then I came across that verse, and for some reason it just struck me because it was the enemies part of it. I had nothing but enemies that night on both sides. Enemies. And then I kind of got convicted because it said, when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord. And I said, like, who am I kidding? I've been a bad guy for many, many years now. And something just happened, whether it's the Holy Spirit, whether God reached into my heart at that moment. But it just got me. That verse got me. And I have it right here. I have a tattoo of it right here. And only because I never want to forget that night. And then I came to another verse that also kind of put things in perspective for me. And it was Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, which was all about trusting God. And that was a night, I basically said, I may die in here. And if I die in here and there is an eternity, I want to know where I'm going to go. And that's what kind of put me on a search. And it wasn't only, the Bible that I read. I had my wife send me in books on every faith. I had nothing but time on my hands, and all I did was read. And I was a guy that, I went to trial 5 times. Evidence meant a lot for me. I think in terms of evidence, Jack, till today. You're not selling me the Brooklyn Bridge when I'm paying attention. I want to see the facts, and you're going to have to prove stuff to me. So I've been that way. And so I was looking for proof and evidence to see if there's really something about this faith. And my wife was a strong Christian. So was my mother-in-law. I wasn't buying into it. I just respected their faith because they were sincere about it. But I spent 3 years almost doing the work, and I came out of there person of faith.
Tell me a bit more about that. Like, how have you used your time dealing with the law? Like, how did you use that to evaluate the cases for God and the cases for Jesus? You talked in your book about witness testimony being the most powerful form of evidence.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to go under the assumption, and there's, I think, without getting into all the detail, there's plenty of evidence to prove that the Bible is a reliable source of information. And I believe that. Okay, I think there's enough evidence to corroborate the existence of the Bible, the writings of the Bible. So that's the first thing you have to establish, is this a reliable source? And I believe it is 100%. So then, I'm a New Testament guy, basically. And one of the most, there was a lot of factual evidence in there as far as I'm concerned, but one of the most, because of my background, because of my lifestyle, was the apostles. The way they all went to their death, proclaiming that they saw Jesus rise again from the dead. And that was powerful evidence for me. Look, I was on the street. Guys are not going to give their life up for something they don't believe in. Yeah. So they believed this 1,000%. It wasn't 1, it wasn't 5, it was 12 men that did that. Something had to happen. And so to me, that evidence was very, very powerful. And I guess because of my street background, I looked at that and I said, wow, this is really clear and convincing evidence that there is a risen Jesus. And that's what the Christian faith is based upon. If you don't believe that, there's nothing. And if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then Christianity is a waste of time. It's nothing.
Were you an atheist before?
I grew up a Catholic.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through high school. I was an altar boy the whole bit. But the way Catholic school was structured back then, it was a subject in school for me.
Yeah.
It was rules and regulations and discipline. And I was a little bit of a renegade, so I wasn't buying into it that either. I just had to obey it. And so I wasn't a person of faith. Do you believe in God? Yeah, I do. Makes sense. Something had to cause all of this,
Figures like yourself or Andrew Tate have gone viral for their unique, controversial lives. You ran a multi-million-dollar scheme and did time in the mob. He's a renowned fighter, but was involved in some other businesses. is there a way to live your life to where you can yield interesting stories without compromising your values?
Well, I don't think you should ever compromise your values, Jack. I don't believe that. I don't think there's ever an excuse to compromise your values. So I don't quite understand where you're going with that.
Like, how can you live an interesting life without turning to, like, some vices, Because people look at you and Andrew, and they kind of see you guys had these rough backgrounds, but you kind of transcended your character. Do you think it's possible for someone to live a life without all this negativity, but still be interesting,
Yeah, I mean, listen, you don't have to be in the street or be in a ring, to have an interesting life. There's a lot of interesting lifestyles out there, just by doing the right thing, in many ways. A lot of people have struggled in a good way to get where they are, and that's of interest, I mean, look, there's a friend of mine who's a very successful business guy, he's my partner, actually, who had a tremendous bout with a brain tumor. And the way he survived that and what's happened as a result, it's a fascinating story. And he's never compromised his values. So there are a lot of struggles and there's a lot of good things that people have done that are still very interesting. They don't have to, But I don't look at it as compromising my values when I was in that life, because that life was my value.
Yeah.
I had an ideological view of that life, and hopefully I won't be in a position to compromise my values ever, because that's just not good.
That was something that Jordan challenged you on a bit. Do you believe morality is relative? Like, if you think you're doing the right thing, are you really going to face some type of karmic retribution for it?
I don't believe in karma. That's, I don't want to say an atheist, but that's a worldly, statement. But I do believe in consequences. There's consequences for your actions. And I think they do catch up to you at some point, whether in this life or the next, they're going to. And that doesn't mean, there could be good people. There's an age-old question: why do bad things happen to good people? We live in a fallen world. That's just the way it is. I mean, why did 12 kids playing on the soccer field get bombed the other day in Israel? I mean, it's horrible, But that's the world we live in, and we don't have the answers. Maybe when this world is over, we'll have some answers, but we don't. It's terrible. This is part of life. I've seen a lot of bad things happen to good people. I've seen lives cut prematurely. That should never have happened. But what can you do about it? It's just the way it is. But I don't think you don't have to compromise your values to have an interesting story.
Yeah.
If that's what the question was. No.
So you did a stream last night. This is kind of on morality as well, about the Olympics. There's been some controversy there, and Andrew and Tristan have been protesting it. What do you think of the Olympic situation?
I think that was a disgusting display. I don't know how you get any kind of satisfaction or expect to get any glory by defaming, abusing a certain group of people, a religion, a nationality, or anything else. And that's exactly what they did, these drag queens. I think the French government, or whoever was in charge of that, should be ashamed of themselves, because they cheapened the Olympics. They showed that they don't have a lot of regard for the athletes. To start something like that with so much controversy was so unnecessary. To turn off, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of people worldwide, when these athletes have worked their rear ends off for years to get into that competition, there was no place for it. I don't understand, Jack, why they give drag queens so much platform. Why? What is it that's so special about them?
What do you think is the agenda?
At the root of all of this, to me, it's what is a drag queen and what are they trying to do? They're trying to break up the family and get control of our kids and influence them at an early age, because it's these same people that are introducing pornographic material into our schools at 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. It's look, you have an alternative lifestyle. That's your business. Don't throw it in our face, and don't think we have to accept it in the way you want us to accept it, meaning that we don't have to physically abuse you. We don't have to do anything. Just leave us alone. Yeah. But to try to force it on us in such a disgusting way, I don't understand why there's a Pride Month. Why are we celebrating somebody that believes that they aren't who they were born to be? You're changing your sex and we have to celebrate that? What's to celebrate? I don't understand this, But okay, that's what you want to do. But why do we give them such a platform? Why do we cater to them? When I say we, our government. One thing that got me that I think is, I'm going to be honest with you, I really try to look at things logically, but I really have bad feelings in my heart for this administration. When we have a president that gets up there and says that it's immoral and outrageous to ban gender-affirming surgery in minor children. When the leader of the free world can say something like that, does he understand what this is? It's mutilation.
Yeah.
And then take it a step further, like our governor here that says the parents don't have a right to know if that's happening with their child. This is sick. I think it's demonic. And to me, listen, I think it's a demonic plan to break up the family, get control of our kids, and turn their lifestyles into something that it wasn't meant to be. I don't get it. And, nobody's going to shut me up about it because, like I said, look, I may have been a mobster, and I may have really had bad feelings about our government at one time, but I love this country. I love my country. My country gave me a lot of opportunity. I'm here. I have kids and grandchildren that I raising here. I want this country to be for them what it was for me. And I don't see that happening. I mean, if we don't get control of this, look, we have a woke military now. We have serious enemies.
Yeah.
I just read something that was really upsetting, that China and Russia are far advanced in their military weaponization than we are. These are two countries that are all of a sudden allies, becoming allies. Iran broke when Trump left office. Now they're supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and coming against Israel. And we're next. They'd love to blow us off the face of the earth. And we're not paying attention to this the way we should. These are real threats. Our dollar is diminishing. It's worth not even 1% almost of the value it was 10, 15 years ago. What happens if they knock our currency out as the world currency? This country takes a nosedive.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Putting people in office that don't realize this and don't want to make America first and protect us. We have immigrants coming across the border can you understand it? I know I've said it since day one.
Yeah.
They want to turn every state blue. We have 198 Democratic Congress people that voted against having ID when you register to vote. Who ever heard of that?
If you think that they're running the country into the ground, what is their motivation for doing so? Is there a bigger play?
I wrote a book, Mafia Democracy. I've seen it for years now. It's all about power and control. These people don't ever want to lose power.
Yeah.
They want to stay in their positions. They want to remain wealthy. Listen, why do Congress people go in, blue-collar people come out multimillionaires? Nancy Pelosi is the greatest stock trader in the world.
Yeah.
Do you believe that? The way they manipulate, I know that. Listen, when I had 18 licenses, I was paying a government guy to get me the licenses.
Yeah.
I understand the game. But, I said it before, the mafia is now in Washington, D.C. It's all about power and control. That's it. And they don't want to give it up. They don't want to give it up.
Running schemes in the mafia, did you make yourself the face of those schemes? Or was it usually you would kind of have a puppet be the public-facing person? I guess the equivalence I'm drawing here is that the politicians in power might not actually be the people making the decisions. Your experience, has that led you to believe that's the case?
Well, listen, they cater to the money people. They're making the decisions, but they obviously cater to the people behind them, the money. The George Soros for, a guy that should be banned from the United States to doing any kind of business here.
Sure.
Because the way he's trying to manipulate this country, put in all these progressive prosecutors and everything else that's destroying many of our communities. If I were president, you come into this country, I see your influence once, wherever you are, we're going to find you and we're going to put you in jail or worse. You got to come on strong with these people. That's one place where, sometimes fear works. Kept guys straight on the street at times. You can't let these things be abusive to our country and hurt our communities and our people.
Do you think George Soros is more powerful than the president?
Listen, money is power, and people that want money will give in to that power. So more powerful, they have a lot of power. Let's put it that way. A lot of power. Nobody's trying to stop them.
So you've helped several NFL, NBA, and MLB players break gambling addictions. What's your opinion on gambling?
Well, listen, the government certainly learned how to do business from us. You know, I knew guys who went to jail for gambling. I was indicted for that. You know, listen, I think gambling, I've seen more people destroy their lives over gambling than I have with drugs. It's definitely an addiction. If you have that kind of personality, you can be in serious trouble. Athletes, they're more of a target for gambling, or they're more, disposed to gambling because they're very competitive.
Yeah.
You know, you gamble, it's just part of your competitive nature. It raises the stakes. It makes the competition, more interesting to you. So gamblers, athletes are at risk for gambling. And I know, I've spoken over the last 25 years to thousands of athletes, both pro and collegiate level, even high school. But look, I was against legalizing gambling because I don't believe if you give people more access to something that they're going to get better. They're going to deal with it better. That's not the answer. You know, you got crazy people in New York thinking you can put drugs in machines and give people more access and that's going to cure the problem. It's insanity. It makes no sense. Yeah. You know, so you have more problems in college now with college athletes gambling because it's easier access. They can do it online in their birthday suit in their dorm room, where before they had to go outside or go to a bookmaker or something like that. So it's a serious issue, and it's absolutely addicting. And if you have that personality, you can get caught up.
You've talked about gambling, immigration, the LGBTQ community, the inflation problem, some insider trading stuff. What group in society do you think is being the most irresponsible? You know,
it starts at the top and it trickles down. I mean, I think the divisiveness in the country, and I'll hold Trump, responsible for some of this also. People listen to the people above them. You know, our country is so divided now because of all the divisiveness at the top. It's very damaging. You know, when you hear our leaders constantly bickering and calling names to one another and fighting and drawing such a line between us, division is terrible. Division is how people get destroyed from within. And that's what's happening here in this country now. There used to be a time, you can sit down and talk. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you can talk about it. Now you can't. I'm hearing that people are canceling their marriages because of, opposite political beliefs. Yeah. It was never like this before. This country is so divided ideologically now, and I attribute that to the people on the top. I also think it's there's two things that are extremely dangerous for any society. Here in America, I say this. Whenever the government starts to weaponize its agencies to go after its political enemies, we're in real trouble. Real trouble. Obviously, that's happening. They can hide it. They can gaslight us, whatever. It's happening. There's no question about it.
You're talking about the three-letter agencies?
Talking about FBI, the Department of Justice, whatever, the IRS, whatever agency they use. It's happening. We can see it. If you deny it, you're delusional. It's happening. The secondly is when the media covers for that, and the media doesn't report the news, but reports their own ideology, and they cover up. And those two things are happening in a big way. That's communism. When the media only reports what that side of the government wants them to report, that you're in a lot of trouble. It's happening here in the United States, and we need to get a hold of that. And also, I say this too. One of the reasons why they gave me a problem in the UK is because I said Andrew and Tristan are innocent until proven guilty. They said, well, it doesn't work that way in Romania. I said, no, it works that way anywhere on the planet. Yeah. You're innocent until proven guilty, even if the system of law enforcement doesn't work that way. That's still the way it should be. And people, why do you say that? What do you mean why you say it? You think the government are angels?
Yeah.
You know how many guys are in prison, people in prison that shouldn't be there? You know how many times, evidence is suppressed and law enforcement makes mistakes? There were 220 people on death row that were freed from DNA analysis. And some of it was prosecutorial misconduct. Some of it was withholding of evidence. These people are not angels on the top. They have reasons for doing what they're doing, and they do make mistakes. I'm totally against the death penalty.
Really?
Yeah, because if you make one mistake and put one innocent person to death and the whole system is no bed, death is irreversible. And they do make mistakes, and they do wrong things. So listen, put a guy in prison for life. It's not it's not a cakewalk. Trust me, I've been there. You don't want to be in prison for life. But you can't have, in a civilized society, you can't have the death penalty when the system is prone to mistakes or government overreach.
Have you never met a man so dangerous that you believe that he shouldn't be kept alive?
No. Listen, if you're going to die of natural causes or somebody's going to kill him on the street, that's one thing. But the government can't kill him. You put him in, we have prisons now that you wish you were dead in.
Yeah.
In Florence, in places like that, or you were in Alcatraz the way it used to be, or some of these, you don't want to be alive in this. You got nothing. It's torture.
I guess on gambling, why do you think Michael Jordan started playing baseball?
Well, I was told that there was so much heat, because I was working with the NBA at the time, that there was so much heat on Michael. They told him, listen, just go away for a while. They didn't tell him to go play baseball, but he wanted to stay active, so that's why he went to play baseball. But, when his father died and all that was killed and all that stuff happened, they just wanted him to get out, to take the heat off of the NBA for a while. And so he started playing baseball until he was able to come back.
I'm curious, as a basketball fan, do you think Jordan is greater than LeBron James, for instance?
I'm not a fan of LeBron.
Really?
I mean, he's a great player. You can never take that away from him. But to me, it's Jordan and Kobe Bryant. I love Kobe. I just loved his style. I loved the way he carried himself. The first rookie presentation class that I did for the NBA in '96, I believe, that's when I met Kobe. And I spoke to him for 2 hours because I found out that, he was raised in Italy. So we talked about Italy and all this kind of stuff. And I admired the young man at that point. Look what he became. He's great. And I love Jordan. I love the whole Jordan era. He killed my Knicks. Don't get me wrong. Him and the guy and all of them. But I loved Jordan, his game and the way he competed. Same with Kobe. I'm just not a real fan of LeBron.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, gosh. That's so hard, I think two things that have maybe in some ways kept me alive. I think I'm sitting here for that reason. And two things that my dad, again, told me that stuck with me, extremely valuable in my former life, and I found it to be valuable throughout my life. And that is, he always told me, be a good listener, be very slow to speak, and when you say something, make sure you can back it up, or you say something of intelligence, but be very slow to speak. Be a good listener. Very valuable in that life. The second thing he taught me was be the last person to pass judgment on somebody. Because in this life, when your turn comes, and it will come, people are going to remember. If you were the first to pass judgment, you're going to be the first to be judged. And that was such valuable information, even till today. I found out, Jack, you'll appreciate this. You're a smart young guy, but in negotiating in that life, I had to negotiate all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes very serious. Sometimes I was negotiating for somebody's life. And, the art of negotiation to me is sometimes you're the smartest person in the room, but you don't want anybody to know that.
Yeah.
Not until the end. So you let people talk, you remain quiet, you let people talk, let them, maybe ask a question here and there. And very valuable at the end of that sit down that you're having. And sometimes you're not the smartest person in the room. But if you keep your mouth shut, people don't know that. What does this guy know? What is he, And by the time they talk, I love to give a braggart. I love to let them talk. I love it. Talk all you, spend the next hour talking all you want. By the end of his conversation, I know everything about him. He's not going to beat me. Now that I know everything, where he's coming from, his personality, his character, what he's looking at, it proved to be very valuable to me throughout my life. Because you're negotiating in life all the time.
Yeah.
You negotiate with your wife, your kids. Everything is a negotiation.
When meeting new people that are potential business partners or someone that you're negotiating with, perhaps, what are some maybe questions you ask them to get the most out of them, or some body language things that you're looking for?
Well, I let them start, really. And it all depends what circumstances we're under. I mean, if I'm interviewing somebody for a job, it's one thing. I want to know their background, where they worked before, stuff like that. I'll ask them questions about their family life, just try to get a little more than their business knowledge, to see what kind of character they are. But it just really, it's within the context of the conversation that you start to judge somebody and get to know them, a little bit as best you can within that time, but it's been very effective for me, very effective. And, and respect is a big thing, Jack, to let people think and know that you're respecting them right off the bat. The only way what I tell somebody, the only way you're going to not have my respect is if you lose it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's up to you.
I guess by that same token, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
Maybe something that you took and regret taking.
I mean, maybe the worst thing I did was get involved in that life, I don't know. It's hard to say, because if something doesn't make sense to me, I dismiss it.
Yeah.
I think I have a gift, Jack, and that gift is I'm able to move on from bad things. I really am. And my wife sometimes, she doesn't understand it, Like some of the terrible things I've seen in my life, or some of the things that I've been through, I'm able to put it past me and just move on without really having it impact me in a negative way. I'm very thankful of that, because I don't know why. I think it's a gift.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think I certainly am not the only one that has that gift, but those of us that do, is valuable when you can move on from some tragic things in your life. It's not because you don't have feeling. You have feeling, and they can really be bothersome and affect you, but to be able to overcome them and move on, I think is a gift. Not a talent, it's a gift.
Well, is there any other topic that you'd like to talk about before we wrap this up?
I think you really covered. You're very good at what you do. I can say that after, as you know, doing many of these.
Yeah, for sure. Tell me about this new book. You just gifted me this.
Yeah.
Mafia Democracy.
Yeah, it's, I'll tell you how that originated. I wrote a business book, I'll Make You an Offer You Can't Refuse. And I owed my publisher, HarperCollins, another book. So they said to me, what do you want to write? I said, well, you tell me. They said, we'd like you to write a political book. I said, okay. They said, off the top of your head, what would you call it? Just like that, I said, Mafia Democracy. Why? I said, because our government is a mafia now. This was 8 years ago. So they said, write it. Boom, they give me a big advance. I go back and start writing the book.
Yeah.
I wrote about 4 chapters. And I go to my wife. I said, why am I doing this? I said, nobody's bothering me now. I have no issues with the government. I said, I have friends in the government now. I said, people are going to get mad at me because I'm telling it just like it is.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not writing the book. I went back to my publisher. I gave him the advance back. I said, I'm not writing the book. Cut to 3 years ago. I said, I have to write this book. I said, people have to be aware of what's going on. I started to see it worse than I had seen it before, the way this government is acting. And so there's no fluff in this book. I go down the middle. It's not, biased either way. I tell it like it is. And I'm the satisfaction I've been getting is, you read the comments from Amazon. Michael, now we get it. Now we see it. You pointed it out. We got it. We understand it. Because people need to know.
Sure.
Jack, it drives me crazy when I see people up there that is incompetent. And I say, these people are controlling our lives, controlling my kids for the future. How did they get there?
Yeah.
I wouldn't put them in charge of a drugstore, a candy store. And they're telling us what to do and how to live.
I'm excited to check it out. Michael, before we wrap up, where can people find you?
YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, all the social media spots. I'm even on TikTok. I don't pay a lot of attention to that, but I'm on there. Facebook, of course. And my website is michaelfranzese.com. I also, I'm in the wine business, franzesewine.com. I'm in the pizza business.
Oh.
So I'm all over the place.
It's non-alcoholic wine, right?
We just introduced the non-alcoholic wine. No, it's alcoholic wine. We have, the Pinot, we have red and white wines. And we just introduced a great non-alcoholic wine, Jack, I'm telling you. The process that we use, it's wine And then we have a special process to extract the alcohol out of the wine, so it still tastes like wine, like regular wine. Yeah, it's great. We just launched it, and getting great feedback on it so far, so we're happy with it.
I'll make sure to buy some.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, this has been your guest, Michael Franzese. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you.